All right, we are live. Welcome everybody who is joining us out there on the internet. My name is Tony Nagatani, and you are watching this via my live stream channel, either on YouTube, Facebook Live, or even my Periscope. This is a conversation that we're hosting today in conjunction with my blog, which is called Sign Cosign Tangent.com. So if you're watching this, please go check that out on the internet. There's some writings up there, and there'll be some video content, a whole bunch of different stuff. But I'm excited today because we're going to be talking about, quite frankly, one of my favorite pieces of IP of all time, regardless of movie, book, television, what have you, and that is Dune. But before we get into that conversation, I wanted to introduce my guest today, Nikos Leverenz, who I met through the magic of Twitter. And this is actually the first time Nikos and I are talking face to face. So this is a really exciting happening. So I really can't introduce you as well as I have some of my previous conversation partners. So Nikos, tell us about yourself. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, first off, let me just say that I'm a little bit triggered by the title of your blog. It brings back very unhappy memories from junior year high school trigonometry class with Mr. Wong, which was only topped by the torture of calculus during my senior year of high school at Maryknoll back in the early 90s, a long time ago, in a galaxy not so far away. So happy to be here. Right now, I am the director or the manager. Let me get this straight. I am the grants development and policy manager at Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center, which is a merger of the Life Foundation, which is the state's oldest and largest AIDS services organization, and the Child Project, which has delivered sterile syringes to people who inject drugs for over 30 years throughout the state. And we work on HIV/AIDS, hepatitis C. We've done a lot of homeless outreach, and anybody who's interested can look at our website, hhhrc.org, and check us out. And we've done a lot of great work, even during this pandemic. Most nonprofits with the pandemic, they've scaled back. We actually ramped up. So in collaboration with the Hawaii Food Bank, we've provided over 300,000 pounds of food to people in need over the past year. We're also managing the quarantine center in Waikiki right now in collaboration with the state and the city. I'm also board president of the Drug Policy Forum of Hawaii, which has been around since 1993. I can't do the math off the top of my head now, but for a long time. So I am an advocate for adult use cannabis legalization and for the decriminalization of drug use and possession.
Excellent. So, dude, we're gonna talk.
I can talk about myself for a number of minutes. So,
well, I was just gonna.
I was born and raised here in Honolulu. I graduated from Maryknoll High School in 1991, and then I spent 2.5 decades in California, going to school. I did my undergrad in Los Angeles, did my legal studies in Sacramento, and I worked around the legislative process of California for the better part of a decade before I decided to move back here to Hawaii to be with family for a bit.
Yeah, heck yeah! Well, that is awesome, man. You have an amazing background, and we're going to be talking about science fiction today. But I think we're gonna have to talk about some of those other things, especially the work you're doing, like with HIV/AIDS and prevention and distributing clean needles for those who are in need to really help public health of those things. Because I have a little bit of a political background too, but I'm on the hacky electoral politics side, whereas you're actually doing good work, making a difference in very directly through engagement. So we got to talk about that some other time. So I'll hit you up with that. Dude, that's awesome. Well, welcome to the stream, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us today. So we're going to be talking, like I said today, about Dune, and which is, like I said earlier, it's my favorite science fiction of all time. It came along for me at a very formative age. But just starting off with you, sir, how did you first hear or come to find the novel or the movie, if that was the first thing you ever saw of Dune? Like, what is your Dune origin story?
My Dune origin story is with the David Lynch film from '84. I think I saw it on HBO or on video cassette. I might have actually seen it on Betamax at my aunt's house. I think it was also on HBO a lot for a period of time, and I definitely had access to HBO. So I read the novel around 85, 86. And I read the novel and subsequent novel sequentially. I read 5 of the 6 original books.
Wow.
So I have fond memories of reading God Emperor Dune one summer. On an old kind of recliner in my parents' reading room, and I took to it right straight away. Even as a young person in parochial school, I sort of really grokked on the amazing scope and texture of the story. It wove elements of psychology, religion, political economy, it was a massive work. I had not really encountered anything quite like it up to that point in time, and in some ways, I really haven't since. So it really set a high bar for me when it comes to speculative fiction. And I don't read much speculative fiction anymore. I would like to get back into that. I do a lot of nonfiction reading. One of the great things about me participating in this is that I'm going to read the 6 Dune novels on my Kindle.
Oh, nice.
And I was able to do that, to get that the other day. And I read about, I don't know how many pages I read, but I read the first 3 chapters of the first novel again. And it really struck me how it immediately grabs you. It was very, I love the way that Frank Herbert focused on dialogue and making dialogue and interaction and character very central to the way the plot moves. And that really stands in stark contrast to the some of the modern novels. I tried reading the Butlerian Jihad. And we can talk about that later. But his son and his co-author, they just launch you straight away into this intergalactic, battle, and it's like it's just kind of overwhelming. And I couldn't really kind of get a sense of, what the characters were about. But I'll give that another shot too at some point in time. I'm one of these people who has, a long reading list, but I would like to definitely enter the Dune universe again.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we should get into those subsequent novels. I've read a few of them, and one of my bigger not complaints, but I guess criticisms is it's always difficult when the progenitor of an IP passes away before they're able to complete their works, and as is the case with Frank Herbert, because he wrote Dune, and after Chapter House Dune, he had intentionally, there was supposed to be at least one more novel that he was going to write, but he didn't get a chance to finish it. And so, years later, his son Brian Herbert and also another notable science fiction writer, Kevin J. Anderson, as you said, they wrote many books to sort of fill in some gaps and sort of took some artistic license on their own that to me they are fun a little. The ones that I have read, and I've read the first 3 that came out, I read, and of the Brian Herbert novels, and I read them like candy, but it feels to me it's more about I don't want to say cashing in, because I've interacted with Brian Herbert on Twitter, and he's a lovely, really? He'll tweet you back.
Really? Awesome.
He's a really cool guy in that way. And but
the question is, do you still get a nerdgasm when he interacts with you?
Of course I do. Of course I do. Of course. Are you kidding me? I mean, because that's the thing. It's like, I never thought I'd ever be interacting with an author that I had read, but it's just difficult because it's not really his IP. And while he's living and working in the Dune space that his father invented. It's not exactly his, and so it's very difficult for me to take that as canon. And so in my mind, I kind of the Brian Herbert novels are separate, but we can get into that a little bit later too, because I got to tell my Dune origin story, which is like you. I first came across Dune in the form of the movie. Now, I'm a little bit younger than you are, not very much though. I was born in 1981, and when the movie Dune came out in 1984, directed by David Lynch, and the movie Dune shares a lot of visual similarities to Return of the Jedi. And so, with a desert setting and, Jabba the Hutt's kind of like a worm sort of creation. And so my father saw the trailer for 1984 Dune, and for whatever the reason, thought to himself, oh, this movie must be kind of like Star Wars. Let me take my 3-year-old to go and see Dune in the movie theater when I was living on the Big Island. Which is pretty funny. So I saw this movie. Everything about it went completely over my head, but I also loved it because the music is so good in that movie, and there's so much to really sort of latch into it. And it was, all this. The cool thing about the movie is, the special effects, a lot of practical effects, and the costumes were wonderful. And I actually would force the kids in preschool to play Dune with me during recess time, which is kind of funny. And I didn't know it was a book until 7 or 8 years later, when I was in Walden Books and walked by the science fiction aisle and came by Dune, and I was like, oh, what's this? And I picked it up, and I begged my mother to get it for me, and she said no to begin with, and then eventually, after subsequent visits to Walden Books and me always coming back with it, she's like, okay, fine. So I had this book and I tried to read it, and it. The movie went over my head. The book went way over my head, just because the book was written in, encompasses different languages and all these foreign concepts. It has like an appendices. And so I would watch the movie, which I became semi-obsessed with. And I became very familiar with that story. And I would read, especially the appendices in the back with the definitions of all the words and the histories of all the houses, like Atreides, like Harkonnen, all that sort of stuff. And so I knew all that stuff cold. And I like to say I started reading the book Dune when I was 8 years old, and I didn't finish it until I was 17. And I actually, because I kept starting it and never finishing it. And then finally, I was actually flying to the mainland to go look at colleges, actually. And I finally had a dedicated few hours on an airline flight from, ultimately from Honolulu up to central New York. And I managed to finish the book finally. And, and I still didn't fully grasp it because I was so young, and just especially a lot of the concepts, especially like the more psychedelic concepts that happen within the book, where I was not I didn't have a background in recreational substances at that time and whatnot, and so a lot of it still went over my head, but I really fully began to understand after reading the book. And so it's funny. It's because I read the book for so long and became so obsessed with it for so long as a kid, yet didn't really fully understand it. And then, with us going to war in Iraq, and I began to notice the linguistic similarities between Iraq and Arrakis, and the cultures, the Islamic culture, which is very prominently featured, sort of like a speculative mishmash of the future. And so all those sorts of things. And so that's kind of how, for me, Dune is bookending kind of the way that, I think in terms of where the human race could potentially go because of all the different, the way that humans evolved throughout the course of those books. And of course, in the subsequent years, I did read the Frank Herbert novels. And then I also read, as I said, those Brian Herbert, Kevin J. Anderson, the first three, the House Atreides, House Harkonnen, and House Carino books, that sort of was a prequel to Dune, at which point they began releasing so many new books all the time. And I was like, I think you guys are in this a little bit more for cash than you are because of love of story, So, but, we can talk about, again, we can talk about it later, but that's kind of how I got into Dune. But so let's just talk about, I guess, let's try to contain this conversation. Let's see if we can, at least, to the first novel, which to me is the seminal work, and it has a beginning, it has an end, it wraps up. It is a Messiah story. But I guess, like, let me ask you, this is kind of like a mundane question at this point, but who's your favorite character from that novel?
I always kind of liked Lady Jessica, because Lady Jessica, she was there and she risked a lot. She became sort of the grandmother of the Fremen, who actually were, I guess we find out later, descendants of the people of this planet, the Zen Sunni warriors. You talk about sort of the integration of Islamic culture, and I guess of Buddha Dharma as well. I'm a meditation practitioner, and before I moved back, I spent 4.5 months as a resident at Upaya Zen Center. So, but growing up in Catholic school, school, which I did for 13 years,
yeah.
I got the interplay of religion very well, and I like the fact that Jessica just basically thumbed her nose at the wishes of her mother superior, and had Paul, and was with her son through it all. And she also gave birth to Alia as well, the knife wielder.
Yeah. Saint Alia of the Knife. Yes,
the knife,
yes.
Yeah. I'm a little sketchy,
No.
As I told you, I enjoy the book. I've enjoyed the movie, but I don't have it all down. But one of the things that Catholicism does is that it acculturates you to a lot of bizarre language and concepts. So I kind of felt at home going through Frank Herbert's Dune universe, having the sayings before each chapter.
Yes.
The appendices that gives you a little bit of the backstory. I just gobbled that stuff up.
Yeah.
I mean, I had the Dune encyclopedia too.
Yes.
The old Berkeley days, and I tried looking for that. I don't think they've reprinted it.
They have not.
And it's really too bad. I hope that they do, because I would totally buy something like that.
Yeah.
What a treasure trove that was. In terms of the other characters, I think I like Jessica, and of course I like Paul, because Paul is the one who, it's his journey that's central. Not just to his own family and to himself, but to his adopted home world as well.
Yeah, it's really, so a couple of things I wanted to just I guess drill down upon. So with the Lady Jessica overall, I didn't know it at the time when I first read the book, but I was being introduced to like a very strong female protagonist. And looking back on, just understanding that Dune, the novel itself, was written in the early 60s, 1965, I believe, is when the original publishing date of the full novel, as the novel actually happened. It's not like novels back in those days, had that strong representation for female characters, let alone, Jessica herself is the catalyst for the entire story of Dune, because it is her decision to give birth to a male child in Paul that is the impetus for the entire rest of the story. There would not, he was the Kwisatz that came early. He was supposed to be born a generation later, but because of her choice, all of the events that happen in the subsequent 7,000 or 8,000 years through the rest of the entire novels are set along to their course. And so through her, and I don't want to say indoctrinated, but people don't really, I feel like in modern pop culture, give Frank Herbert a lot of credit, or enough credit, for having that strong character who was that central, and not just Jessica too, but the order, that the Bene Gesserit order that she came from, having and so just that in and of itself, so many things from the novel Dune was very far ahead of its time. And the way that in 1965, Frank Herbert was sort of able to pre-visualize just the idea of human potential through genetics, and the way that, the concept of other memory, which until Paul, only women are able to access the genetic memories of all of the people who came before them in their familial lines. and also weaving that together with this sort of anti-artificial intelligence idea, because the whole book itself is based upon a future where humanity has banned computers, because there's not allowed to be thinking machines. Machines can only accomplish tasks. So on one hand, we have, go ahead.
On the one hand, it's this really high-tech society where you can transport yourself across the galaxy or even across galaxies, and yet they don't have a lot of computers around.
Yeah, computers are illegal.
It was, and they have mentats instead.
Yep. And
as the human computer.
Yeah. No. You're a tech person. I mean, we met on
Not
Twitter.
Really.
Well, I mean, we're talking by a video stream, right? But I mean, you're a learned individual. You read, you write. What do you make of that concept? Because so the idea of the Butlerian Jihad was that was humans with machines enslaved humans who didn't have machines, right, or thinking machines. And so now we see Facebook, we see Twitter, we see social media, this sort of groupthink mentality. Like, I mean, do you have like any grander thoughts about do you think artificial intelligence is a potential evil, similarly to how Frank Herbert may have?
Well, everything has potential evil and potential goodness in it, doesn't it? It's how we as a society and as a species relate to it, and what boundaries are we going to set upon it. Technology has the potential of sort of taking our imperfections and projecting them on a very grand scale that we can't even necessarily possibly fathom. I don't want to say that AI is necessarily a Frankenstein in the making, but our relationship with technology, both as a society and as a species, it's gonna be a continual evolution and reckoning. I fear that we're already kind of in a position where interaction via electronic communications, as opposed to person-to-person interaction, has become sort of the default way of doing things, and there are real costs to that because we are biological beings. We definitely have a host of physiological and psychological benefits from being in the company of others. Even people who are relative hermits, like people who are Taoist hermits in the central mountains of China. They have the company of each other, and they also really interact with the community that supports them. So technology is not a panacea, I don't think, for what ails the human condition, but I don't think it's the monster under the bed, so to speak. Technology is here. The question is, how do we as a society sort of make use of this technology here? And one of the things that's so exciting about mindfulness and that kind of training is that we have a lot of elasticity and neuroplasticity here in the gray matter in our brain, and technology is not necessarily conducive to that. What is conducive is rest, repose, and intentional mind-body practice, which is something I think that many characters in Dune would embrace as well.
Oh, 100%. Just the physical mastery, the prana bindu, as and also the meditative litany against fear, and the complete physical mastery down to one's own personal molecular level to control, it's
somatic. And the litany against fear, I memorized that right off the bat. And that I was used to again being acculturated to memorizing prayers,
the catechisms.
But the better we are able to inhabit this body mind, the better we are able to encounter the world that we have, whether it's technology, nature, human beings, or other realms of existence, if you choose to use psychedelics, which is another important, I think, frontier of exploration that that needs to be explored.
No,
That's currently precluded by this insane, acidine war on drugs.
Yeah. We got to do an entire talk about just that entire thing, because as you're talking about neuroplasticity, and certainly goodness, like psilocybin microdosing and things like that can help to promote neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, and in many ways that's sort of I wouldn't say sort of, I guess, the kernels of my thoughts, and beliefs as far as like mental exploration are rooted in the novel Dune, because of what the character, they ingest an artificial substance to push their brains to the next level of human evolution, and to be able to do math computations to the point where they can merge space at 2 points at once and jump it, So the
but
coolest,
the substances of the natural world,
yes,
it didn't come out of a laboratory.
Yes, absolutely right, and just we do have very, what is it, in like the early 1900s is when we decided to pass all these laws and legislations in the United States of America, against cannabis use, and then all the other various forms of substances that are out there, and while I don't think necessarily heroin should be available for people to use, there is definitely a lot. I know in Oregon right now, like psilocybin mushrooms have been, I believe, decriminalized. I believe,
correct.
And also, there's a lot of really interesting medical research going on, especially with neuroscience in regards to that I'm very much trying to pay as much attention to as I can, just for.
Psilocybin really wasn't criminalized until it was placed on Schedule 1 of the Federal Controlled Substances Act in 1970.
Oh, wow.
Cannabis, there was actually a growing body of research, scientific research on psilocybin in the 50s and 60s, and scheduling just put the lid on that. So we need to deschedule psilocybin, just like we need to deschedule cannabis, and we need to find a better way to regulate drug use. And certainly, people with drug problems are not helped by sustained involvement in the criminal legal system.
No doubt about it. Well, let me segue a little bit. This is not exactly on the outline, but a few years ago, there was a documentary that was
an
produced.
Outline. Wait, what did I miss it?
Well, so a few years ago, there was a documentary that was produced about a Dune movie that never came into existence, and it was set to be directed by psychedelic filmmaker Alejandro Jodorowsky. Are you familiar with this documentary?
I'm familiar with it. Haven't seen it yet, though, unfortunately.
Well, no, it's cool. I would recommend
the outlines of the story a little bit, and it's financing, right?
Oh yeah, it's financing, and then the needed. So it was meant to be a very psychedelic film, and in many ways, the description of the film from the documentary, the would-be first attempt to make the narrative film Dune, it took a lot of liberties with the story, but the cast of the movie was supposed to be epic. For instance, Orson Welles was supposed to play Baron Harkonnen, and Salvador Dali was supposed to play, Emperor Shaddam IV, and the Mick Jagger at one point, I believe, was attached to play Fade Routha, and so it was one of those movies. But and the interesting thing is also, in that film, they did a lot of artistic design and pre-production for the film. So H.R. Giger, who is the artist who did the Alien, he designed the Alien, and it is a very influential Gothic artist. He did a lot of the artwork, the preconception artwork for that film. And ultimately, I just really want to give a plug to that documentary, because at the very end, they show essentially the storyboards that they had put together for the film, and it was this big book that it was 16 by 9 painted images all in a row for the complete, almost comic book panels for what his Dune would have been. And the interesting thing is, they made 17 or 18 of these books that they were taking to the studios to pitch the movie at that time, and the studios took them and kept them. And when you flip through the book now, you see a lot of the art design that ended up in movies like Flash Gordon, with and also like the Masters of the Universe movie, and even some elements that made it into like Star Wars and Blade Runner. So it's just it's very like a lot of. So in the 1980s, we had this run of science fiction and fantasy movies, in many ways sparked because of Star Wars and the big hit that became, but also because visual effects were achievable, you know? And so essentially this Jodorowsky's Dune, which never was, influenced, like dozens and dozens of science fiction fantasy movies that came out in the early to mid 80s, and that, which inspired, I think, our generation to go on and to become the filmmakers behind the Marvel movies and these big So
looking at the storyboards of these films, just as you were talking about Masters of the Universe, I hadn't thought about that film in a number of years, because it's really a train wreck of a movie.
Oh yeah,
but it looks fantastic. I believe the artist's name was Mobius, who did some of the set designing, and even Ralph McQuarrie with the Star Wars universe. Some of his conceptual art was amazing, and of course Giger, who can, any fan of the movies has to like H.R. Giger. So,
no doubt about
or Giger.
Yeah,
I don't know how you pronounce his name.
Giger Geiger, just very fast. I mean, Google that. Anyone out there watching it, if you aren't familiar with the work of H.R. Giger, especially, and Mobius as well, he was a comic book artist too, I believe. Mobius, right? So, what the Inkle, I believe, was his something like that. Anyway, regardless, the Dune inspired a lot of artists, and ultimately that Jodorowsky film did not come into being. And they, the De Laurentiis producers, they're a family of Italian producers. They made spaghetti westerns and movies like Red Sonja as well, and also the original Conan the Barbarian movie. They were the producers behind that. They acquired the script rights to the book Dune in the early 80s, and originally their intention was to have Ridley Scott go ahead and direct that movie Dune, but he backed out at the last minute, and so they scrambled and they found David Lynch, who had just finished doing Elephant Man, Oscar acclaimed movie Elephant Man, and so he took up a little bit of that pre-production work that Ridley Scott had commissioned, and then set about making, in my opinion, a really good adaptation, not a complete adaptation, but a good adaptation of the book Dune in 1984's David Lynch's Dune. Now, that is your entrance point into Dune. So do you think it's a good movie?
It's a partially good movie. I think up until the part he encounters the Fremen people.
Okay.
I think it's very good. The Fremen people's kind of redundant. It does a good job of kind of laying the context and the groundwork of the larger story. But I felt that the second half of the film, and maybe a little bit more than that, was just kind of a hatchet job. I realized that they had time constraints, but I've even seen the extended cut. And I'm glad that the forthcoming film is going to be 2 parts and
hopefully
maybe up to 5 hours, because I feel that this story demands time. It demands characterization. It demands exploration of the world of Fremen mythology and identity and kinship. One of the things that really struck me was how much the Fremen really enjoyed one another's company, and it was them living in peace, relative peace with each other. And with the natural world, and what a stark contrast that was to the internecine warfare of the Landsraad and the Imperial House and the Guild and the Bene Gesserit and all the politics and commerce and reckless disregard for human life that the so-called civilized world had, as compared to the indigenous people of the planet.
Yeah, one of the criticisms that Dune oftentimes gets pegged with is the idea of the white messiah, the white savior figure who comes, and I don't subscribe to that, because in many ways, especially in the book, like the Fremen culture is sort of is literally what saves Jessica and Paul after they have to flee Erechine, and so while yes, the portrayal is this outsider, this this Spanish-esque guy who comes to a desert people, but he appropriates their culture and takes that mantle onto himself. And even he calls himself Muad'Dib, and that becomes his really in perpetuity the name of the emperor. From the times of Muad'Dib, and so he assimilates into the culture. And then only through that cultural assimilation is able to take that next step and become the Kwisatz Haderach and become that next step in human evolution.
Right. And not only that, he winds up conquering the conquerors.
Yes.
With the strength of the Fremen culture and the spice melange.
Mm-hmm. The one thing, to bring it back to the movie for a second, I agree with you that it is definitely a hatchet job, and the first half is a lot more of a direct, not a parable for the book, for lack of a better word. But I will say they invented those weirding modules, which are those sound guns. Now, it is silly, but I can see how in 1982, when they were filming that movie with this, this epic with all those adult themes that are very much before their time, how a script writer might condense down the idea of the weirding way, because remember, it is the power of the voice, the persuasive power of the voice, which ultimately is how Jessica and Paul are able to free themselves and to flee in the desert. They condense that power into sound waves that are shot out of a gun. It's a very American simplified version of what is going on with the weirding way. But for me, when
spaghetti Western version of the weirding way. Yes,
exactly. Yeah, that's exactly that is absolutely apt. But for me, at the age of 5, when I first saw that movie, it allowed me to sort of understand sort of what was going on because of the themes of the voice, even though I didn't particularly think that the effect was that well executed. It was kind of cheesy. But, when you're super duper young, you're willing to let those things go. Like if I had seen Dune when I was 15, I might have been like, whoa, this is just too much for me. But I think because I had seen it so often when I was very impressionable, those things didn't bother me. I found that the way that they distilled kernels of information into more, easily expressed things for the movie to be useful to an extent, but nowhere near as effective or as meaningful as the novel. And so, that.
Yeah. Alia was totally underwritten in the movie too. It's she's just kind of this so-called demon force that just kind of comes out of the ether in the movie. And I didn't appreciate that really.
Both, and that's interesting because it's such a difficult thing to do because Alia is, I think, 3 years old, right? It's supposed to be around 3 at the end of the novel Dune, yet she possesses all the knowledge of her entire female genetic ancestry within her brain, and has since the moment that Jessica took the water of life and awakened those other memories inside of her. So the abomination, all that sort of stuff. But a 3-year-old actress, I mean, there's no actress in the world that could possibly pull that off. And so I'm curious and I don't think we're going to get to see Alia in the Denis Villeneuve movie because it's only going to be the first half, or it would seem, of the book. I am curious though. So first of all, I'm really hopeful that we're going to get part 2 of the Villeneuve movie. But the other thing is, I'm curious, especially how they're going to do Alia, because there's so much about her character that is difficult to pull off, and I don't think that there's let's segue a little bit into the sci-fi miniseries, because that was a more faithful textual, I guess, adaptation of the novel to a longer running 6-hour long miniseries event. But that character of Alia in Dune it's not really glossed over. She's there, but similarly to the David Lynch film, that character is not nearly as impactful as she was, in the book for a number of reasons. Now, did you see the miniseries?
I saw part of the miniseries. Okay. I didn't finish it. I think I saw maybe the first 2 or 3 hours of it, and then I just let it drop because I thought it looked pretty good for the time. Although some of the effects, it was kind of a strange time where CGI was kind of in a, it was that Star Wars prequel phase, right, where it looked grand, but it still looked kind of kitschy and like a kind of a matte painting in motion.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but it didn't have the Vangelis soundtrack.
Yeah.
I didn't find much out of I didn't get a lot out of the cast, even though they had some very talented actors
Sure.
there. So it was just a matter of nice concept, but poor execution, I think.
Yeah.
But maybe I'll give that a shot again as well, in my extended foray into the Frank Herbert universe.
It's I found it interesting to watch. It is one of my least favorite iterations of Dune, and for me the reason why is because it came out in 2001, I believe, or 2001, like early 2000s, before 9/11, and they did it on Sci-Fi Channel, and then it became Sci-Fi Channel's like top rated like event ever, believe it or not, at that time. So there was tremendous demand to actually watch it, and a lot of people compared to Sci-Fi Channel's overall audience, like actually tuned in to see it, which was pretty cool. But because it was Sci-Fi Channel budgets, they, the actors, and there were a few, like Alec Newman, who went on to be a fairly prominent, like, character actor in science fiction fantasy IP, actually was in it. And, like Giancarlo Giannini, who is an Italian character actor, was in it. But a lot of the other, William Hurt was Duke Leto, and he was the top billing actor, in the miniseries. But the majority of the rest of the cast were, kind of not the greatest, but soap opera level actors, and not just that, they were sort of foreign soap opera level actors. So, there was heavy, thick accents, which was fine because the idea is that, it's in the future, and, like the languages didn't matter so much. But at the same time, as you pointed out, it felt very canned because it was shot all indoors in a studio. Like there were no exterior shots. Like it was all, green screens. And so it didn't have that like life-full, lived-in feel that the 1984 movie. Say what you will about the script for the 84 movie, those sets were immaculate. And like they went to Mexico and filmed in the deserts, and like real smoke and people running in those very heavy rubber costumes. Whereas the miniseries,
which is kind of insane if you think about it, putting people in rubber suits in the middle of a desert.
Oh yeah. Well, so apparently for the movie, there was a scene where they're running through black smoke, and they literally took tires and they set tires on fire, and so the entire cast, their eyes were burning, and they were choking on like they totally abused the actors on that film. So Patrick Stewart and Kyle MacLachlan are running through the desert in those outfits, like through the black smoke, just like, all right, just to get the shot. So I mean, but it had that reality to it that the miniseries didn't. And the biggest bummer for me about the miniseries is the cinematographer was an Academy Award-winning cinematographer for the miniseries, Vittorio Storaro. I believe he won the best cinematography Oscar for the film The Last Emperor.
That was a wonderful movie.
That's a great film, right?
Wonderful movie.
But
what a lush movie that was.
Oh God, such a great film. But why they hired him to shoot a movie entirely indoors is just beyond me. Anyway. So I enjoy watching it from just a critical perspective, and you should absolutely go out and check it out because it's notable.
How do I find it? I don't think it's streaming anywhere. I think the DVDs are pretty hard to find. I tried looking for it a few years ago. In fact, I think I had it at one point, and then I just tossed it away. I sold it.
Yeah. No, I have the DVD at home. Well, at home, I have the DVD. It's in a box somewhere
in California.
Actually, I drove it up to my mom's place in Montana, where my mother lives, before I moved back to Honolulu. Yeah. Well, long story short, I was born out here. My dad's from Chicago. My mom's from Montana. They met out here. They had me. I was born and raised here. My mom now works for the railroad out in Montana, and so she lives in the house that my grandfather and my grandmother had, and so they're out there until they retire. And then they're finally going to move back
Missoula. What town in Montana?
Great Falls, Montana. Yeah. I know. I was just up there 4 or 5 weeks ago visiting, and also picking up my cat because he had to be emigrated into Hawaii. But did some trout fishing. Anyway,
awesome.
Love Montana. So
I would like to get to Montana one of these days. Missoula is at the congruence of 3 rivers and 5 mountain ranges.
Yep.
You want to talk about energy of a place, right?
It's gorgeous. I mean, and it's so far north that they call it the Big Sky Country because the sky appears to be so much bigger because of how far north in the hemisphere it actually is. It's a majestic state, and it's the problem is with Montana is that it snows. It's
Right.
Extreme
Winter.
temperatures. Yeah. So, but it is a gorgeous place. But no. So my mother is currently holding on to my DVD copy of the miniseries. I believe you can find it. You might be able to rent it on Amazon, and also if you hit up YouTube and
Okay.
yeah, you might want to take a quick peek around YouTube because it's there, and you don't really lose very much in terms of visual quality because it was kind of this
it was rough.
Yeah,
it was
it was a little rough to begin with, but so going on to that, we already kind of talked about the the Brian Herbert novel, so let's just skip over that. Let's. I'm very excited now. So, they made Dune and Children of Dune into a miniseries, and for what it's worth, they were fine. They were very good literal adaptations, but they didn't have the grandeur of a feature film that the David Lynch movie kind of had for, in terms of just, art design and production value. So now, this year, we're finally because it was delayed because of COVID, but they're going to release the Dune film on HBO Max, and also I believe they're going to release it in IMAX theaters, and also there is going to be, hopefully we'll have enough vaccinations, hopefully, to be able to have an actual theatrical release of the film, because Denis Villeneuve shot the film, I believe, in 70 millimeter, and it was it was shot to be displayed on a big old screen. And so, how excited are you for the new Dune movie to come out?
In some ways, it's a movie that I've been waiting for most of my life. I've always wanted the Dune series to be remade in some, especially the first book to be remade for the big screen. We just talked about the sci-fi film, but I want a film that is contemporary and that more thoroughly gives justice to the Fremen culture and to the kinship and camaraderie that Paul feels with, and he becomes, a Fremen.
Yes.
Basically.
Yes. Yep.
His mother becomes their mother.
The Sayadina. Yep. Like the Reverend Mother of all of the Fremen. Yep.
Yeah. So this is territory that I think that this director and the actors that I've seen, who have been cast can take it to the next level beyond kitsch and make it really sort of emotionally impactful, even if you're not a sci-fi geek or even given to speculative fiction, because, we have an American society now that's been reared in these grand dramas like Game of Thrones. So we can have the violence, we can have the characterization, we can have, the grandeur, and we can also have, the intimacy of characters.
Yeah.
And it's characters that ultimately win the day when it comes to films and to any filmed entertainment, whether it's a movie or a series. And I hope that Chalamet is a wonderful actor, and I think he'll do a fine job.
Yeah.
But he's a little old. Paul is supposed to be 15 years old. So, he, of course, he can play it.
Sure.
Given his looks and his mannerisms.
Yep.
He'll be he can play an adolescent for the next decade probably. And the rest of the cast, from what I've seen, seems pretty solid as well. But I like how this director took a story like Arrival and kind of gripped you, even though there was so much that was unspoken about what the creatures in Arrival were trying to communicate. And I thought it was an effective science fiction movie. And it was surprising to me how much I was taken in by Arrival. So I really expect great things from this Dune movie.
Yeah. I 100% agree. All indications are that it stands to be excellent. And it's funny because Alejandro Jodorowsky, when he tried to make Dune in the 70s, was not himself a Dune fan. David Lynch, when he made Dune in 1984, he was not a big Dune fan. He did it because it was the next logical step in his career. And
it was the way station between The Elephant Man and Blue Velvet, right?
Yes.
If memory serves, which is kind of an interesting trilogy of films. Elephant Man was another childhood favorite, oddly, because it was on HBO a lot.
Yep.
And it was just so categorically different than anything I had ever seen.
Yep.
And in some ways, it really still impacts me in terms of the way, people can be so cruel to one another.
Yep. No, absolutely. And I mean, it made so the story is with Lynch is he turned down Return of the Jedi to do Dune, believe it or not, which is kind of funny because that was the arc of his career.
Actually.
Yeah. So, which I think is pretty funny. But the point I wanted to make though is Denis Villeneuve, unlike David Lynch and unlike Jodorowsky, he grew up as a fan of the novel, and he also was a fan of the David Lynch movie, but truly, a kindred spirit in that, like he read the book and understood, like what that Lynch film didn't do correctly, and so his life's dream was to actually make this film, and just seeing the production stills that we have seen, the trailer that I'm going to play, but hopefully YouTube won't ding this, but whatever, we're going to play the trailer in a minute. But
can you frame it so there's like enough sort of alteration to it?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm also thinking it's been so long since this trailer dropped.
Because I think if you put it in this, like a screen like we're appearing in right now, I think that's enough of a alteration where it could pass, but who knows? Well, hopefully we won't be consigned to DCMA or DMCA.
Yeah. Well,
purgatory.
We'll see. You know what? If I have to drop it in later after this live stream, I can do that because it'll be just like a quick little bit. But the other thing is the casting of this film, as you made mention to, is phenomenal. I mean, beyond just Chalamet, like the idea, Jason Momoa playing Duncan Idaho, I'm really, really excited for that. And he's kind of, Duncan's my favorite character in the Dune novel, but at the same time, he's not in the novel for very long. He's only sort of like in the beginning, and and that's it. And so it's neat that kind of like they're showing him off. But Zendaya as Cheney, Oscar Isaac is going to play Duke Leto, which I am very excited to see, and the look of the armor, like of those stills released, they just. Everything to me screams like prestige science fiction movie, and seeing like Sicario and seeing and The Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, and just the exquisite detail that Villeneuve puts into making his films, and understanding that it is a passion project for him. He wants to bring this to the screen. It really, really it has me excited. So I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and I'm going to play the trailer. Okay, so sit back and let's watch.
Let it roll.
There's something happening to me. There's something awakening in my mind. I can't control it.
What did you see?
There's a crusade coming.
Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain. You inherit too much power. You have proven you can rule yourself. Now you must learn to rule others. Something none of your ancestors learned.
My father rules an entire planet.
He's losing it.
He's getting a richer one.
He'll lose that one too. Arrakis is a death trap.
I'll kill him. This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Let's fight like demons.
An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do?
I know you.
One day, the legend will be born. All of civilization depends on it.
The future. I can see it. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
My Lord Duke.
Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
Go, go, go!
Experience it in IMAX, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great trailer. It's a great trailer, isn't it?
I'll be there. I had forgotten what the Thopters look like.
Yeah.
And, the dragonfly effect, I think, is much superior to the boxy, flying hulks in the 84 film.
Well, even from the text, from the text of the book, the thwop 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 of the Thopter, like that was something that was very alluded to, and just because it was both the sci-fi the channel miniseries and the David Lynch movie. It was a mechanical like helicopter almost sort of a thing, and it was, but just the way it looks to me to be, it has the production value of a feature film, and it's the care taken by somebody who really appreciates that piece of intellectual property, and I am so freaking excited to see that movie. And we've been waiting a long time because it was supposed to come out, I think, originally last November. Then they moved it to December. Then COVID hit. Then they kept pushing the release date forward. So now we're finally going to get it. What would I say? The release date
What's the latest?
It's October 1st. 2021 is when we're going to get it now. And I guess it's going to be a simultaneous release in theaters as well as on HBO Max. Although me personally, I'm hoping we'll have enough herd immunity by then that they might even just pull it from HBO. Not that I don't love HBO Max, because I do, but I want to see it on as big of a screen as possible, because it was shot in IMAX, and even at the end, experience it in IMAX. And so that's what I really, really want to do. So, all right. Well,
I'll be there.
Heck yeah. Well, we've been doing this now. We've been talking for about 57 minutes. And so, Nico, I just want to say, do you have any final thoughts on Dune before we say goodbye?
My final thought is, let's get reading and let's prepare for this movie.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I am stoked. Nikos, it is good to talk to you over video. Sir, we need to come back and talk about your work.
Sure.
And, because
would love to.
The things that you do, I'm very interested in all the different avenues, from your work in HIV/AIDS to helping out addicts, and then also to the, your work with legalization of cannabis and also psilocybin, like microdosing therapy, those sorts of things. I would love to get into that, and also hear more about your meditation practices too, and how all that comes together. So yeah,
I contain multitudes.
Yes, sir, you do. Yes, you do, sir. All right. Well, audience, thank you so much for listening to this. Please like and subscribe to this Sign Cosign Tangent YouTube channel. Mahalo for watching, and take care, everybody. Good night.
Mahalo.